in your sort of busy days to just take a bit of time. There we go. To take a bit of time to pause and reflect and think about your own coaching practice. So that's very much the intention today. And the topic today is we're going to just talk around and share our framework around transformational coaching. So that's the intention. Again, the idea or the intention is to stimulate some thinking and reflection on your own practice. And for those of you who don't know us, so there are lots of familiar names in the list of people who've joined us, but for those who don't know, so Damion and I are both partners at Catalyst Wonfor. We both work as executive coaches and supervisors, and of course we do a lot of coach training. So Damion, anything else that you would want to say as we get started?
Just it's great to be able to connect with everybody. So yeah, I hope the conversation is reflective and engaging for you.
Great. So actually, just as we get started, it would be good to get a little bit of sort of feedback from everybody who's joining us. So when you hear the term transformational coaching, we're curious what it means for you. So perhaps just into the chat panel, whether that's just a word or a sentence, but just a sense of what does it mean for you when you think about transformational coaching. And just take a minute to share that with us. Thank you, Vicky. So change are the first three things, and insights that stick. Yeah, so thank you, Jeanette. Yeah, so some real themes actually around, as you say, insights that create shifts, change at perhaps a more profound or fundamental level that's long lasting. Thank you, Kat, because something has been moved or reshaped. And so thank you. So real sort of sense around, supporting someone to create that real shift in thinking or shift in relationship to something. So a few more still coming in. Yeah, so thank you, Cynthia and Lara. So unlocking change from within. So thank you. So, and again, with all these things, it's always useful just to pause and think about what it means for us. What's the language that we would use to describe it, not only for ourselves, but also for our coachees. So Damion, I think we're going to share a model to start with, but I suppose the question to you would be, what does it mean for you? Because I know, it was 4 years ago you set up Catalyst Wonfor, and as I often say to people when we're doing clean language, people don't choose words by accident, they choose them because they mean something. So what does it mean for you? What made you focus on that as the intention for Catalyst Wonfor?
Yeah, thank you, Liz. So I think in the preceding years, so the 10 years or so, I'd been training coaches before I started Catalyst with my previous coaching consultancy. We used to use the word transformation a lot. And when I created Catalyst, it was really to develop coaches that could work in a transformational way as such. So we have got a couple of concepts I want to show and share with the group. But I think what I want to start with saying is, sometimes as coaches, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to create transformation. I think the root meaning of the word transformation is changing shape. And, from experience, we know that might not happen when we're with the coachee. What I suppose our encouragement as always is we need to focus on creating the conditions for transformation to happen. And that's our role. And part of that is how we are being, and that part of that is our way of working with the client. But I think it's really important, especially if you're learning to be a coach, because often when we hear these words, it can increase the intensity of the pressure we put on ourselves to have an impact. But from experience, we learn that our role is to create these conditions, and when we create the conditions, the transformation will often happen. So I just wanted to say that before we start to explore what we mean by transformation. And And to do that, I just want to share this model, which some of the group will have seen before. You know, a lot of our work has been shaped by other theories like Theory U, which I'm sure some of the people listening will be familiar with. But what we're seeing here is, and I think often when we've spoken around what transformation means with our faculty, you know, you'll hear us talk a lot about the facts that we're moving more, well, I suppose, beyond the mere presenting topic, and we're often working at a deeper level with the coachee. So when I say deeper level, there's that sort of sense of often we'll be working at a level of beliefs and values and sense of purpose and I suppose fundamentally identity. So when we use words like transformation, we often will be using other words such as a shift. We'll be creating a shift in that person's, I suppose, sense of identity, fundamentally who they are. Because for behavior to change, to take hold, they need to go through this identity shift, you know, and I'd say that transformational coaching really enables them to do that. So we could say it shifts their mindset, but fundamentally they're going to shift their relationship, often to themselves, with what they're bringing to coaching. So what this flow map is trying to present is the fact that, you know, a way a transformational coach should be working is at this deeper level. So often dropping below the waterline in a way that they're holding the session and facilitating the coachee. And you can see some images on this map, such as, you know, the brain at the top and the heart and the gut at the bottom. But this sense of often, you know, we're starting to work more with a felt sense in the coaching session, and we're creating a shift in that felt sense. But what we can see at the bottom as well, which I think is quite an important aspect, is we're managing the time and the process for the session. So it's our responsibility to make sure that the coachee leaves the coaching session in an adult state. And I'm sure some of the group who have trained with us will have heard us say this a number of times. So I think it's really important. So we actually are managing the process. So that sort of closing stage is really there above the waterline to make sure that the coachee is leaving in an adult ego state, you know. So they're the first thoughts around this. I just want to add one more bit, Liz, and then I'll pause just to see what you want to come in. So when we talk about transformational coaching, we often will use this phraseology. So we talk about creating an energetic or embodied shift in the coaching session. Okay, so creating an energetic or embodied shift of the coachee in the coaching session. And again, why is that important? How does this link to transformation? Well, you know, there's so much written now around, I suppose, how do we sustain change, you know, after the coaching has taken place? You know, wonderful that the coachee has had some real clarity on their thinking around what they're going to do differently. But then the reality is when they get outside the coaching session, all of their sort of traits and characteristics are going to be there. So actually, if a coach is able to create this embodied shift, so the coach is having this shift in their felt sense about their topic, we could say change in state, and actually that could be supportive to mean that they can change their trait outside. So a very simplistic example is the coachee who's bringing a topic about having a difficult conversation with their boss. You know, well, great that the coaches help them think that through. But when they get outside the coaching session, all the emotions, all the characteristics, all of their potential hooks are going to be in that conversation, compared to more of a transformational process where the coachee will be playing that out in the coaching session. So they have more chance of regulating themselves and being in the state they want to be when they meet the leader in the real world. So, you know, a lot of this dropping is going to be the coach presencing themselves and being able to deep and attend to the coachee at a deeper level, which I know we're going to come on and talk about in a moment. So I'm just going to pause there, Liz, and just see if there are any reflections or comeback from you on anything I shared.
Yeah, I think the things that are coming up for me just as I'm listening to you, Damion, around that real sense of actually of emergence that, you know, we don't necessarily always see. And you made the point, we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be with the person at the moment of insight. And sometimes we are, and sometimes we're not. And so that real sense of trusting the process and trusting that what we're working with is often emerging over time. The other thing that just came up for me is those moments where what our coachee might be sitting with is really quite challenging. So whether they're feeling really stuck, or whether, as you say, they're dealing with something that is not only difficult in the moment, but has been difficult for a while, or has almost crept up on them. And again, what we learn over time is to stay with it, because actually what's happening in that moment, if we can really just stay present to it, there's something wanting or trying to emerge from that. But of course, the temptation can be to try and go more quickly, or to try and help that person get over it perhaps more quickly. So I think there's really something about working in the here and now with people. And I'm seeing some questions coming up. So, where's the difference between this and counselling? So we can perhaps just hold that as a curiosity as we go through it. So I suppose just before we move on, Damion, one thing that was occurring to me as you were talking is just, if you were to give yourself a piece of advice as you look back to yourself, because you mentioned as you're training as a coach, if you gave yourself a piece of advice, looking back at yourself as a new coach, what would be your one piece of advice you'd give yourself around this?
I think I would say, this is an unfolding process. I think I've probably been, in a place where I have judged myself quite hard. If what am I paying attention to as the coach? What we're trying to pay attention to, and what's really different for me between coaching and counselling, just picking up on Angeline's point, is this mobilization of energy. So actually in the session itself, I'm creating a shift in the coachee's energy, so they have greater capacity to do what they need to do between now and when I next see them. I think what I would say to myself is that's what you pay attention to, because I think otherwise we hold on to these sort of ideas that actually the coachee is going to sort of transform in front of us, when actually behavior change is hard and it takes time, and there are so many pieces that the coachee is going to have to learn about themselves as they're working through this. So picking up on your point, when it's difficult in the conversation, well, something important is happening. This is an edge that the coachee is leaning into with your support, rather than thinking that you need to fix it or solve it or make them feel better. So I think for me, it's about paying attention to that mobilization of energy, because I think that's the most important thing for me in terms of the outcome of the coaching.
Yeah. So feels like a useful time just to share the framework that you and I sort of very much use as an underpinning of the work that we do.
Yeah, and I suppose as I show this to the group, really keen to see your responses around this, because we were trying to really work on, so what does a transformational coach, so part of it's how what are they doing, but a lot of this is also about how we're being as a coach in the conversation itself. So our framework, I'm just going to jump forward a slide, looks like this. And it really looks at these 8 different ways of being in the coaching session itself, and that's held by the outer rim and the inner rim, actually, which we can sort of talk about. So maybe it'd be helpful is if I just can start the process of describing this. So as you're listening, just see how it lands with you. Now, for those that have trained with us and know us, you won't be surprised that presence is at the middle of this model, in terms of our capacity to be present, in the present moment awareness of our direct experience as we're tending to the coachee, and our capacity to really hold that space. So that's at the center. And there's so much research around the way this is an input in an inroad to the flow state, for instance. So, no surprise, that's at the center of our model. And then from there, we really start to connect to the ways that we're tending to the coachee. So you can sort of see there about being curious, holding an awareness with curiosity means we're really sort of starting to attune to the coachee. There's part of curiosity is also about care, and that sort of compassionate attending that comes from curiosity, and non-judgmental. We're creating a space where the coachee can really be seen and heard and express things to us that they haven't spoken about before. And so, that connects to our capacity to really, really listen to the coachee with all of our senses. And that final sort of part of that next rim is about belief in the coachee's potential. We're not about fixing, we're about really creating the space for them to connect to their innate potential. Meet them where they are, but can we really hold that belief in their potential? Because that connects to our intention. As a coach, I'm going to be embodying something in the session, or it's easy for me to take on what my coaching client is embodying otherwise. So from this presence, creating a real clear intention of how I'm intervening and how I'm being with the client. At any moment, what's this for and who's this for? Because fundamentally, I'm there to generate, what it says there, awareness, responsibility, and choice. And we could change choice for control, we could change control for confidence. But, you can start to see here that at the heart of this model is about our being as a coach, our capacity to really be present and be very conscious of our intention of how we're working and then attending to the client. So Liz, I'm wondering if you want to say something just about the outer rim before we pick up on any of the sort of wedges.
Yeah. Well, it really builds on what you said, Damion. So, if we think of the outer rim as like the container that we create when we're working with someone, and of course, what you've just talked about are all the key elements of creating that. And then, of course, there's the work that we do as the coach to really perhaps more explicitly contract with our coachees around it, and things that everybody on the call will be familiar with, but it, when we talk about confidentiality, that we're not making assumptions around it, that actually we are really paying attention to what that means. We're really paying attention to someone's experience of coaching before and how that might show up here and what the expectations are. So really attending closely to the conditions that create that psychological safety, so someone can share with us something they may never have shared before. And also, for me, the other important part of it is, it's an honest, open human relationship. So we're also sharing a little bit of, how we're working, how we're going to work with someone, so they get a sense of what they can expect in terms of working with us. So, we always say ABC, always be contracting. So at some level, we're always paying attention to the relationship between us, whether that's at the start of the relationship, whether it's at the start of each session, whether it's in the moment. We are always paying attention to what's happening between us. And that really plays into what we've said before about the here and now, is actually what I'm really interested in, is what's happening in this moment between us. And how can we work with that to support whatever the shift is that you're trying to, that coachee is trying to work with.
Yeah, and what you're starting to pick up on there, Liz, is, we can look at any of these ways of intervening, and actually there's a number of layers to them and a different level of depth to them as well. I mean, at the bottom of the framework, you've got facilitating, which is picking up on Cynthia's point, actually, because I agree, we're not there to fix it. We're there to help the coachee help themselves, and we're facilitating the process. And that's why, any good coaching program, the initial starting point will always be a strong process of something like the GROW framework that could really enable us to facilitate the coachee's approach, their thinking. But in our model, that's balanced really with this presence, at the top as well. So we in our training really work hard to really create the capacity in the coach to really center and regulate themselves as they're starting to work with the client and facilitate them through a process. And there's so many layers to these in terms of the way that we may be working. But of course, that heart in terms of our presence and our intention is really clarifying that why we're doing what we're doing. And I have flexibility. That's what I'm trying to create as a coach, to be able to move to where the coachee needs me to be. Remember, we're saying this is about creating an embodied energetic shift in the coachee. Fundamentally, they're feeling more resourced and feeling, able to follow through on the action that's coming from coaching, because coaching is very action orientated, and that's what, again, a lot of these different interventions will be creating. So the presence wedge we can apply to ourselves. This is about our ability to regulate. This is about our ability to really pay attention to self. Psychological mindedness of really the relational dynamics that are playing out. But of course, once we develop this capacity, then it feeds into these other areas. It could feed into modeling, such as me sharing self as instrument and what I'm experiencing in the coaching and what I'm noticing. But of course, my intention is about serving the coachee. That's why I'm doing it, and so on. We dropping down that U in our training, we're also training our coaches in a lot of creative methods and techniques, because again, we're trying to get them out of their normal shift of thinking into a place to really start to explore the presenting topic in a deeper area. So again, we can flip around this model in certain sessions, but what we try to do is try and create a language to explain the way that a coach is likely to be working as they're moving through this more emergent based way of working.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I would add, Damion, is again, it's almost the experience that we go through as coaches as well when we're learning this, is that sense. Because when I look at that model, there are some of the things that we introduce early on in the coaching programs that we run. And of course, as the program goes on, there's a real deepening of what that means. So inquiry and mirroring. So we always talk about questions and listening and playing things back. But of course, as we go through the program, often the nature of those questions changes, or the depth of our listening changes. And the value we place on perhaps just sitting with someone and mirroring back what's happening changes. Because as you say, there's a real sense that actually we start to understand what it means to work at a deeper level with someone, and to slow down, actually, to not rush. And I also, the other thing it takes me to is, I know we've had many conversations over the years around our own sort of ethical practice around, often we ask ourselves, am I doing the right thing here? Maybe I've inputted a little bit more, or maybe I've done something that isn't what I might normally do. Is that okay? And of course, to your point, if I'm really present with the client, there's something I can bounce all over this. There's something about responding to what's there in the moment and what they might need.
Yeah, and I think so that sort of piece that sort of brings up for me is often this is about the coach having courage as well, because some of these ways of working, so we take sort of systemic methods, which is something that we train coaches in. For a lot of coaches, they will hold back because they're making assumptions about where their client is and whether the client is ready. Actually, when you start to break that down, it's often a lot of assumptions the coach is making that aren't necessarily tested. So I think there's something in here around actually the way that I'm intervening, I'm trying to create a different awareness. The other word that came up for me was the sort of holistic approach in terms of this model, hence why it's drawn in a circle as well.
So I think you're looking at the question from Gina.
Yeah. Do you want to pick that up, Liz?
So, well, I suppose my response to it, Gina, is it possible to use my tools and yours? Absolutely. Again, if we stay with this idea of presence, when we're coaching someone, we're using our just as we're encouraging them to use their whole selves, we're using our whole selves. So I'm sure some of the techniques around mindfulness-based stress reduction absolutely will support your clients, and it's something that I know, Damion, you use a lot of that as well as part of your practice. So I'm keeping an eye on the time, Damion, because I'm conscious we're sort of coming up to the end of our half an hour. So it might be useful just to use the chat panel again, perhaps for people to just put into the chat panel a reflection or something they're taking away, or a question that you might still be sitting with. Let's just get a few things coming into the chat panel just as we start to wrap it up.
And I agree. I mean, I was just seeing a lot of reflections around slowing down. And if you look at that journey down, the you, we're presencing ourselves, which is often really tuning into ourselves as well as the coachee. We're trying to create the reflective space for the coachee, which often means we need, by us tuning more into our own process, we're going to be encouraging the coachee to do the same. I'm noticing that I'm experiencing this as I'm listening to you. I'm wondering what's happening to you right now. Again, we're inviting the coachee to come down the you with us.
Yeah, lovely. And some lovely reflections around, accepting that it might be happening outside the session. That's not always happening with us. And Lucilla, thank you. The coach has to have courage sometimes. And Rebecca, that holistic approach. And there's something for me always around, and we've said it, really staying present to the moment, giving yourself permission as the coach to be creative, to go with it, to create something in the moment, because that's often what can be really useful for the coachee. So any last thoughts, Damion, just as we bring this to a close?
So I think and it's a theme of our work, but if we're saying this is what creates transformation, there's a sense of therefore how we're making sure that we're taking care of ourselves so we can be very present and available to our clients. And I know people on the session will be aware of this, but self-care is a critical component of this.
Yeah, great, thank you. So just so thank you all very much for joining us. As always, it's lovely to take the time and spend the time with you all. So the next webinar is Coaching a Leader to Develop an Effective Team on the 14th of June at 1 o'clock. It's a very nice lead into our CPD Day, which I know a number of you will already have signed up for. So our CPD Day, our gathering, is on the 16th of July this year. We had our first one last year and it was a wonderful day, very much about bringing a community of coaches together. So if you haven't signed up already, our encouragement is to do so. I think 90% of the places have already gone, so there are a few left. So do come and join us. It really is a fantastic day. So thanks to everybody. Go well, enjoy the rest of your day. Hopefully we'll see you on the next webinar, and also hopefully see you at the CPD Day. So it's lovely to see everybody. Take care.